It's a live stream now.
Okay,
Yeah,
Chair, the
we are
live stream
now
is on,
live.
Chair. We can start now.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we are now live, so I'll introduce the meeting and then we'll get going. First off, my name's Peter Jeffrey. I'm the chair of the Development Management Committee, and I'm a Park Ward councillor. What I'll do is I'll introduce the rest of the committee and the officers who are taking part this evening, and then I'll run, for the benefit of the speaker and for the people watching on YouTube, I will run through the procedure that we're going to follow at this meeting. So starting with the Planning Committee, we have Councillor Stephen Johnson, who's the Vice Chair, Councillor Nigel Bell, Councillor Karen Collette, Councillor Mo Mills, Councillor Jenny Pattinson, Councillor Ian Sharp, Councillor Richard Smith, and Councillor Mark Watkin, and hopefully I haven't missed anyone off. From the officers' side, we've got Ian Smith, who's the Democratic Services Officer responsible for running the committee meeting, and this evening we've also got Caroline Harris, who's operating the link to YouTube. Speaking for most of the, or for all of the applications, is Paul Baxter, who's the Major Cases Manager, and we've also got Ben Martin here, who's the Interim Head of Planning and Building Control. We have two speakers this evening, both for the first item, and I will go back to taking the items in the order on the agenda, since we now have the correct number of people attached to the meeting. Now, the meeting will follow much the same format as a normal development management, face-to-face meeting. So for each of the main agenda items, I'll ask the planning officer to present his report on the application. I will then invite the speaker opposing the application to speak, and that's for a maximum of 5 minutes, and we'll be quite strict on the 5 minutes and mute anyone who speaks beyond that time. I will then ask we have a councillor wanting to speak, so I will then ask the councillor wishing to speak also for 5 minutes, and the same rule applies. There's nobody speaking for either of the applications or any of the applications this evening. Once the speakers have spoke, I will then invite committee members to discuss the application, and at the end of the committee discussion, I will ask each member in turn to state whether they are for or against the officer's recommendation. So I think that hopefully that makes it clear, but it will become clearer as time goes on. So on to the main agenda. The first item is apologies for absence and committee membership, and I don't believe we have any apologies. I think we've got the full house today.
I've received no apologies, Chair.
Great, thank you, Ian. The second one is disclosures of interest. Have any of the members of the committee any interests they wish to declare? I'm not seeing any hands up, so I'll take that as a no. And item number 3, the minutes of the last meeting, which was 13th of May, these will have to be signed formally at the end of the lockdown, whenever that happens, when I can physically get to the minutes. But in the meantime, are the committee content to accept the minutes as presented?
Yes.
Yes, okay, thank you. Everyone happy? Good. Thanks very much. Right, we'll go straight on to the substantive items on the agenda, and the first one is the land to the rear of 250 St Albans Road. I will ask Paul Baxter to present the case, and then I'll go on with the representations against. So Paul Baxter.
Thank you, Chair. This application relates to land at the rear of 250 St Albans Road. The application site comprises a parcel of land used for covered storage and an adjoining detached single-storey workshop located to the rear of 250 St Albans Road. detached building was recently converted from a double garage to a workshop office and is accessible from Cromer Road. The detached building fronts directly onto the cul-de-sac, forming a turning head at the end of Cromer Road with yellow line waiting restrictions. It's just an aerial view there of the application site outlined in red. The application seeks planning permission for the proposed change of use of the workshop office building to a single self-contained 2-bedroom dwelling. This is the existing floor plans and elevations of the building as it currently stands, with a view from the turning head in Cromer Road. And these are the proposed floor plans. So the proposal is a modification of a previous planning application, which was refused planning permission in October 2019, based upon a poor level of accommodation, which comprised substandard bedroom floor areas, unacceptable ceiling heights and poor outlook, and inadequate private amenity space. The applicant appealed this decision, and the appeal was dismissed, with the planning inspector upholding the reasons for refusal based upon the poor level of accommodation, although this related only to outlook, and inadequate private amenity space. The current application has sought to overcome the reasons for dismissal at appeal by incorporating 2 front dormer windows, one to each of the bedrooms, to overcome poor outlook, and providing additional private amenity space to the west of the application site, comprising 40 square metres. This latter provision will involve the demolition of the existing single-storey structure used to provide covered storage at the rear of the ground floor commercial unit at number 250. The principle of a change of use to a single dwelling is acceptable. The proposed front dormer windows will provide a significantly improved level of amenity for proposed bedrooms in respect of both outlook and natural light. Their scale and design are proportionate to the building and are acceptable, and will give rise to no significant adverse impacts to surrounding properties. At this point, Chair, if I can just clarify that the elevation drawings shown on the appendix to the report in the published agenda are the incorrect drawings. These are the correct revised drawings that have been received, which show slightly smaller dormer windows, more in keeping with the scale of the roof. So these are the drawings that will need to be considered as part of the recommendation. So the additional amenity space provision of 40 square metres, which is the area shown in red on the current plan, is considered acceptable for a dwelling of this size and can be secured by means of a Section 106 agreement. And these additional provisions are considered satisfactory to overcome the appeal inspector's 2 reasons for dismissing the previous appeal. And apart from the corrected drawing and the fact that condition 2 of the recommendation will need to be amended to accommodate that amended drawing, there are no other updates in relation to this application, and the application is therefore recommended for approval.
Well, thank you very much, Paul. Now we have a resident who wishes to speak against the application. That's Angela Banderas. So, Angela, if you can hear us, please
I can.
go ahead. You've now got 5 minutes to speak.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello? Oh, you can hear me. Sorry.
Yeah, we can hear you.
I didn't know if I put it on mute. Okay,
No,
great.
no, I can hear you
Okay,
clearly.
first of all, you can hear me?
Yes, yes.
Right. First of all, the property, the rear of 250 St Albans Road, is actually number 1 Cromer Road Garages. And when the vendor who applied also to change it into a house and a low-level workshop, who was refused and on appeal and everything, he then sold it because he couldn't do anything with it. And the people that bought it changed the address to 250 St Albans Road, and nobody around here understands how he managed to do that. And he bought a little bit of the garden from 250 St Albans Road and then put the whole planning thing through under that address. And when people round here got letters to say about it, they ignored them because they thought 250 St Albans Road, that's not going to affect me, but it does. Now that little bit they're talking about where you turn around in there, the shops along St Albans Road put their bins in the road, and that garage they put a car outside there, the people that own it have put a car outside there for 5 months. And a lady was trying to do a U-turn there because she couldn't move, and she hit my car. Right, there is no room for anything round here. We've got flats going up at Woolworths, we've got flats going up at the bottom of Bradshaw Road, we've got flats going up down at TK Maxx in the Range. There's nowhere to park. It's so overcrowded. And all I want to say is, please consider the well-being of people. You know, I've lived here 25 years. I love my road, I love my neighbours, I love everything. And we're being bullied out by these builders coming in, building on any single tiny bit of land they can get it on. I mean, before long, we'll all be building in our back gardens. That's how ridiculous it is. I've got so much to say and not enough time to say, and I know I'm only supposed to talk about the planning, but anybody that would live in that place is just, there's a little car parking space to the side of it, but it would have to be one of them little tiny cars because nothing else would fit in there, and it would always be blocked in because there's double yellow lines there where people park. Sorry, my neighbour's trying to tell me something else to say.
The windows overlook the house behind.
Yeah, the windows overlook the Balmoral Roadhouse behind, and he did everything in his power because now he looks out of his kitchen window and he's got a brick wall. I look at the end of my garden and I've got a brick wall. That's before they build it higher and put dorms on the front of it that I'm going to see that's going to block out my son. You know, I just think, I don't understand. There's no privacy for that property. I can't imagine anybody living in there.
All residents have rejected it.
Everybody's so upset about it. Please, 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 please don't allow it to go ahead. It's Cromer Road and it's Cromer Road garages. They turned it into a workshop because they were given permission to. It's never been finished. It's never been used. 7 months later, they applied to turn it into a house. It's not fair. We knew that's what they were doing. We never heard anything about it until they'd already got planning permission. No one knew it was even going on.
Because we didn't get the letters.
Well, no one got letters. No one knew anything about it. It's so unfair. I don't mean to get up. It's just, I've lived 2 years with this going on, and it's just really stressful. I can't tell you.
The residents are against it.
Everybody's against it round here. I mean, someone did say to me that one young couple said, oh, we don't care about flats being built. We can get on the property market. But the thing is, who's going to buy that? It's like a rabbit hutch. It isn't even about that. I don't mind these people wanting to build something, but not where we can't drive, we can't turn round. People go to Tesco's, they drive up our road, and then everyone's bashing into each other's cars to get out. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. It's so built up at the end of the road. It's just not fair. Have my 5 minutes up yet? Sorry. I've said too much.
You
Not
still
enough.
have some time, but if you think you've said enough, then that's fine.
Yeah, the thing that really, really is niggling everybody around here is how you can change the name of a property from, the man that owns 1 Cromer Road, I know him, and I know that he was trying to turn that into a house. I knew everything that he was doing. And when he come to the end of it, he threw the towel in and sold it. And then someone else come along, changed the address, and did exactly what he wanted to do. And he paid thousands out for architect drawings and taking it to government and saying, can he have this done? Can he have that done? You know, I just don't get it. It seems a bit weird to me.
And the yellow line.
You have 30 seconds to go, Angela. 30 seconds left.
I can't breathe. The yellow lines are going.
Yeah, because that's only was.
So that's what someone else is telling me about the parking restrictions and that.
Yeah,
So
they are going. We've got more parking space.
I just, you know, there's nowhere to turn round. There's nowhere. It's just awful. Sorry. I didn't have it all planned properly because I've been working from home with this COVID thing. I've been working 7 till 7 and I've just run over here without even reading anything. I didn't even know how to log on.
Okay, Angela, that is your 5 minutes is up now. Okay.
Okay, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much for listening to me.
That's
Sorry.
okay. Thank you for speaking.
And thanks very much.
Thank you.
Excuse me. Thanks very much, Angela. You've covered
Thank you.
lots of points there. I'll just quickly go through the points that I'd like Paul Baxter to comment on. The first one was the business of the change of name, or sorry, the change of address. Second one is the issue about access and congestion with the bins and so on in the road. You've made some comments about the behaviour of the developers, but I'm afraid that's not strictly a planning issue. You've talked about issues about parking and access, and you've raised issues about overlooking and that becoming worse. So I think there's 4 things there which I'll ask Paul to comment on. Can you pick those up, Paul?
Yes, indeed I can, Chair. Thank you. In terms of the address of the property, obviously, once it becomes a new dwelling, they will need to apply through the council and the post office for an official address. That may well be 1 Cromer Road, but that's not a planning matter. The planning drawings in the site location plan clearly identify the site in question, irrespective of how it's referred to at the current moment in time. With regard to bins in the road, obviously we can't control what existing residents and tenants of the properties in St Albans Road do with their bins. There is, however, adequate storage to the side of the property in the garden areas for bin storage and cycle storage in connection with the dwelling itself, and that's the main thing that we're concerned with here. And similarly with parking, there is an integral garage as part of the proposal, which is adequate for a vehicle, and the garden area to the side, which is currently shown for bin and cycle storage, could accommodate a second car if necessary as well. That is in excess of the minimum requirements for a parking space as well. So if necessary, 2 cars could be parked on the site. Under the current maximum car parking standards in the Watford District Plan, the maximum provision is 1.5 spaces for a 2-bedroom dwelling. So the integral garage that's already been provided is sufficient to satisfy that policy. With regard to overlooking, the 2 dormers are on the front of the property, on the front roof slope, facing directly down the turning head, as opposed to being on the rear roof slope facing the adjoining gardens. So there'll be no direct overlooking from those dormer windows in terms of adjoining gardens or adjoining windows. So the size and positioning of the dormer windows are considered acceptable.
Thank you, Paul. I'm just struggling with my mouse at the moment. Thanks very much for that. We now have Councillor Ian Stotesbury wishing to speak. Ian, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. And if the committee will forgive me, a lot of the things I want to raise have already been ably covered. So thank you, Chair, and thank you to Ms Menderes especially for joining us. And really, I want to pay tribute to how hard you've worked to make sure local residents on Cromer Road, on your road, making sure they were aware of this application. I'm really glad you can make it today and speak, especially given the name associated, as you mentioned already, on this application. Lots of residents have contacted me to say they were confused about this application, and there is a resentment of the naming of this application very strongly. So, Chair and colleagues, I've had a number of residents contact me about this development, and I was part of the previous application for housing that was ably refused by this committee. I really want to express the depth of feeling against that residents that I've been speaking to have on this proposal, and given the long and reportedly very tense history with a series of applicants, that residents are really feeling the sheer weight of attrition regarding the continued applications of this site, and are angry that it's back for consideration again. I appreciate that's not a planning matter, but I feel like it's something that should be stated for the record. Residents are already feeling stress and strain of parking demands locally, and many object in principle to infilling such as this, given the parking constraints and concerns, especially given that they've just voted in favour of a parking restriction zone that will be coming in imminently and could have been an abled thing to protect from future developments that I appreciate you can't consider in this meeting due to planning laws. This site is very close to Balmoral Road, and properties on that on that road have already complained about the sheer brick face that's presented by the current building, and are concerned, of course, about the sheer brick face that would be presented by the house that would follow. I note that of the Catalan residents that have written in, the vast majority are in objection to this development. The building, as has already been said this evening, comes after being built into workshops. This is something that many residents locally question, and many have stressed that it appears dormant, and so residents feel this is a stepping stone to the application we see in front of us. While I appreciate committees have to consider applications in front of them, again, this is something that I feel must be said for the record, and I'd like to add my profound frustration to theirs that this application is in front of us, given that there's a perfectly suitable workshop that could be made use of by businesses on St Albans Road, which is, of course, important to the success of the area as well. While this proposal does attempt to address the reasons why the previous application was refused, I feel it doesn't go far enough. The projections, the dormer windows, are not very wide, and I feel they may look more like tunnels than a projection and not actually give that much additional sunlight. And given that the living space, the bedrooms that is, are on the centre of two slanted roofs, the bedrooms will be very challenging to stand and move about with. That, alongside the fact that the bedrooms are substandard in size, the small living space, I believe that this development represents a poor living space, and that in itself may be grounds for refusal. So let me just end by strongly urging the committee to consider the viability of this as a habitable space, and I would really urge you to refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stokesbury. I will ask Paul just to comment on the implications of the latest changes to the plans in terms of their impact on the space on the first floor. So, Paul, could you just comment on that point?
Yes, thank you, Chair. If I could just refer you to the committee report and paragraph 6.4, you'll see there that the bedroom floor areas have been measured where the ceiling height exceeds 1.5 metres. That's in accordance with the nationally described space standards. So whilst the actual bedrooms are larger, and if you, sorry to jump around, but if you look at paragraph 3.1 in the proposal, you'll see that the gross internal area of the bedrooms is 12 square meters and 19 square meters, but when you actually measure them in terms of their usable space in accordance with the national standards, they have areas of 10 and 14 square meters respectively above the 1.5 meter ceiling height. So the minimum usable floor area for a single bedroom is 7.5 square meters, and the minimum for a double bedroom is 11.5 square meters. So the two bedrooms provided are perfectly suitable for one single bedroom and one double bedroom. The dormer windows overcome the previous concerns of the inspector and indeed the planning committee in terms of Velux roof lights were situated within the roof slope quite low down, and gave very little outlook or light to those bedrooms. The dormer windows now proposed are standard dormer windows that you would see on any house and are perfectly adequate in terms of outlook and light. So from that point of view, the bedrooms are perfectly usable. The issue of ceiling heights was raised in the reason for refusal on the previous application. As part of the appeal proposal, accurate dimensioned cross sections were provided to demonstrate that adequate ceiling height was available, and the inspector accepted that, and that's part of the reason why it was only on the grounds of outlook that the accommodation was itself was considered to be substandard. So the dormer windows do overcome the inspector's concerns, and we're satisfied that both of the bedrooms meet the minimum requirements and will provide usable habitable space.
Thank you, Paul. That's very helpful. Before I pass over to the committee, I'm not going to say very much about this. I did go down to the site today and have a look around, and I suppose for me, I mean, I'm obviously very sensitive to the views of the residents and the hurt they feel about the process. The unfortunate thing is that most of that, or nearly all of that, has very little to do with planning law. It's more, I think, to do with the way the developer has gone about this in a rather unsatisfactory series of events, which is understandably upset the neighbours, so they're negatively disposed to this proposal. But what I see as the reality, for better or worse, is that the building exists and it has planning permission. So, if you like, the harm has been done, and converting it from a potential workshop to a proper small dwelling, I can't see how that would cause more harm, if you like, than having it as a workshop. And the physical changes are an improvement rather than a detriment to what's already there. So that's the way I feel about it generally. But I will now hand over to the committee, and I'll ask Councillor Bell to speak first. Councillor Bell, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, can you hear me now, Chair?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yeah, just saying, I largely agree with what you say there. I mean, I can understand that there must be, some of the objections of residents there, but obviously, as Paul, as the planning officer has just said, the reasons for the objection seem to have been the original appeal objection have been overcome, and now the very fact that they've now got more light and outlook seems to have, solved the reason that it was turned down. So I can't see that we've got a reason in planning law now to turn it down. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you. Yes, I'd agree with Councillor Bell. Certainly the conclusion of the officer is the proposed development would provide good quality accommodation and acceptable level of amenity. So I'm not seeing a reason for refusal, and I'm afraid I'd have to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Collette.
Yes, I have sympathy also with the resident about what's going on there. But as you rightly said, Peter and Paul, that bottom line is they're not planning constraints. We can't really do a lot because it doesn't fall under this committee. But what I was going to ask Paul is there something that we can put in place on the developers just to make sure that there's nothing happening that's not right and breaks any building enforcement, just to give the residents some sort of feeling of security that nothing is going to be put in place that isn't agreed by tonight or disagreed, so that we have the correct rules in place and that everything's followed to the latter.
Trying to pick that up, Paul.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, obviously, the only real external changes are going to relate to the fenestration, windows, doors, and the dormer windows in the roof. Obviously, if any of the residents feel that the conversion isn't being carried out in accordance with the approved plans, then our planning enforcement team would obviously be able to investigate that and take appropriate action. Obviously, the conversion to a dwelling will come under the building regulations as well. They will have to comply with all the relevant building regulations for habitable accommodation. So there should be no reason why we can't take appropriate action if the approved plans aren't adhered to.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor Sharp. Are you there, Councillor Sharp? We're not hearing you. Your microphone is switched off. Ian, would you like to see if you can raise Councillor Sharp?
Yes, I will do. Yes, okay. I'll have to duck out the meeting to call him, though. That's the only problem. So.
Okay, we'll just give you a few minutes.
Yes. Okay. Yep. No problem at all.
Yeah, we'll just adjourn the meeting for a few minutes, see if we can get hold of Councillor Sharp.
Chair, Councillor Sharp's used the chat function to say that he can't get his microphone to work. He's not sure why.
Thanks for that, Ian. He could phone in, of course.
Yep.
Are you able to speak to him? Well, Ian Smith is speaking to him, so hopefully he'll get through.
Chair, he's actually made a comment on chat that it wasn't that important, all things considered. So if he's saying carrying on.
Thanks, Mark. I'll just wait for Ian Smith to come back as he's taking the minutes.
Hello, Chair. I'm back. I phoned him and he just went to voicemail. In fact.
Okay. Well,
oh, she's still here. I don't know.
Councillor Watkin to say that what he was going to say wasn't that important, and he just suggests we carry on. So in that case, I am going to carry on without Ian.
Chair, if I can interrupt you, I don't know if you're watching the chat facility, but his latest one is he's content to leave the meeting briefly and not vote while he sorts out his problems. My suggestion to him is he basically reboots his computer. I think his computer's got itself in a bit of a mess, and I'm sure he'll be able to log back in. But that's what he's saying to us, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Watkin. Well, with that, I'm not seeing any more hands up, so I will put the recommendation, the officer's recommendation, to the vote. And the recommendation is that the application be approved subject to section 106 head of terms and conditions as set out in section 8 of this report. So I will go down the list and ask you which way you want to vote. Councillor Johnson.
Sorry, Chair, can I stop for a minute? Is the live feedback on?
Well, it didn't go off.
It's not gone off. It's
I'm
continued.
sorry. I just had to be sure of that before the vote. I do apologise, Chair. Obviously, I've been out of the meeting, so thank you.
Oh,
I'll be quiet.
We've still got live feed.
Yes, we have. I apologise. I had to check, obviously, for democratic purposes.
Okay.
So thank you.
Okay. So, Councillor Johnson, are you in favour of the recommendation?
Yes, I'm in favour.
Councillor Bell.
In favour.
Councillor Collette.
In favour.
Councillor Smith.
In favour.
Councillor Mills.
In favour.
Councillor Pattinson.
In favour.
Councillor Sharp is out of the room. Councillor Watkin.
In favour. And
Councillor Jeffrey is also in favour. So I'm afraid that's a unanimous approval. So that application is now approved. Thank you very much. Now we'll go straight on to the item number 5 on the agenda, which is 807 St Albans Road.
Yeah, can I just check whether you can hear me now?
I'm hearing you now, Ian.
Okay, so I don't know what happened there, but as I say, it cut out at perhaps for other people exactly the right minute, for me the wrong minute when I was about to speak.
Well, it's good to have you back, so you'll be able to hear the whole of the presentation on the next item.
Yeah.
So I'll ask Paul Baxter to present it.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just endeavour to share my screen again. So this next item relates to property at 807 St Albans Road. The application site is located on the western side of St Albans Road between Garston Drive to the south and Garston Lane to the north, and comprises a large detached bungalow set in a wide plot of land. It is adjoined to the north and the south by substantial two-storey houses. This is just an aerial view looking towards the west. You can see the application site outlined in red. The application proposal is to demolish the existing bungalow and erect a terrace of 4 two-storey houses with accommodation in the roof, arranged as a staggered pair of 4 houses. So that's the existing site layout, and that is the proposed site layout. You can see the 2 pairs of houses there, whilst they're adjoined on a party wall, are staggered, reflecting the staggered building line on this section of St Albans Road. The proposed houses will be of a similar scale to the adjacent houses and are considered appropriate in their form, design, height and layout for the site and the context. Just flick through some of the floor plans. These are the ground floor plans, principally kitchen, living, dining areas. First floor plans with 2 bedrooms and potentially a third single bedroom or a study in the roof, served by dormers. That's the front elevation. You can see the 2 pairs have slightly different designs, and that's how the 4 houses will appear in the street scene, adjoining the existing 2-storey houses on either side. And similarly on the rear elevation, that's the view of the 4 houses. Again, that's staggered with the 2 houses on the right hand side further back than the 2 houses on the left hand side. The dwellings will provide a high quality of accommodation and amenity areas for future occupiers. On-site parking, if I can just go back. On-site parking is provided utilising the 2 existing vehicle access points on St Albans Road, with a provision of 1 parking space for each of the dwellings. Following amendments to the application after submission, the development is considered to have appropriate and acceptable relationships with both adjoining properties, and the proposed houses now comply with the residential design guide in terms of the houses on either side and also the properties at the rear, to the effect that they will not create any adverse harm in respect of natural light, outlook or privacy to the surrounding dwellings. If I can just mention to the committee that 1 additional representation has been received from a property at 7 Gwent Close to the rear of the site. 3 main objections being raised. 1 is that the proposed houses have no relationship to the existing original houses in the road. I think that was in relation to design principally, that there is insufficient car parking for this size of property, and that the area is being overdeveloped. All 3 of these issues have been addressed in the committee report. So I would therefore draw members' attention to the recommendation for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. Now, for this one, we have no speakers for or against and no councillors wishing to speak. So I will pass it across to the committee almost straight away and just say very briefly that from my point of view, this seems to be a completely policy compliant application. Its scale and design, I think, fits very well with the neighbourhood. And I was interested, I went down there today and was interested to see that a very similar development is directly opposite this in Wilcon Way. There are 3 little, what I'd call townhouses next to the church, remarkably similar in design. So, you know, it's a mixed design area. It has no particularly strong vernacular character, and I think it fits in very well. Anyway, having said that, I will pass over to Councillor Sharp.
Yes, Chair. Just to say that I agree with the officer recommendation and with the comments you have just made, but I would perhaps add the point that you know, this is a development that you know, it's in these kind of locations that we can actually have, more kind of family housing, and therefore, I think that's another benefit of what we've proposed here.
Absolutely so. Now I can see Ian Smith, you've got your hand up. Have I missed something?
My apologies, Chair. I don't know how that happened. No,
Okay. No, it's all right.
Sorry.
No problem. Councillor Bell, do you want to speak?
Yeah, can you hear me, Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, overall, I agree with what the officer and what you've said, and I think, what a change that we were able to vote for 4 houses for a change rather than 4 flats. I welcome it.
Absolutely.
Great. 4 bedroom houses, or 3.5 bedroom houses, something like that.
Yeah.
So I'm not seeing any more hands, and no one sounds as if they're going to object. So I am going to put the recommendation to the vote, and that is that planning permission be granted subject to conditions listed in section 8 of the officer's report. So so you just say for and against. Councillor Johnson?
For.
Councillor Bell?
For.
Councillor Collette?
For.
Councillor Smith?
For.
Councillor Mills? Have we lost Councillor Mills? Oh, your microphone's off, Councillor. That's better.
Oh,
You're for, right, thank you.
yeah.
Councillor Pattinson?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Sharp? For. Yeah. Councillor Watkin?
For.
And Councillor Jeffrey? For. So that's a unanimous vote for approval. So that is approved. And I will go very rapidly on to 7 to 15 Bridle Path and ask Paul to introduce that one.
Thank you, Chair. Get the right slides up. So this application relates to the site at 7 to 15 Bridle Path. The site is located between the 2 spurs of Bridle Path and comprises a long, narrow site with a frontage to Bridle Path at both its eastern and western ends. The immediate area of Bridle Path contains a variety of different commercial buildings. Planning permission was previously granted in November 2016 for the demolition of the existing buildings and the erection of a Part 5, Part 8, Part 9 story hotel comprising 124 bedrooms. This planning permission was lawfully commenced in October 2019 by the installation of pile 47, forming part of the approved foundation plan. The current application is a Section 73 application to vary Condition 2, which is the approved drawings, and delete Condition 16 relating to off-site highway works of the implemented planning permission. The changes are required due to an area of land at the western end of the site not being within the ownership of the applicant. I'll see if I can indicate where that is. So if you can see the hand of my cursor, there's an area of land at the western end of the site, approximately square in shape, which is in third-party ownership. The original proposal within the approved scheme proposed to incorporate this land and the adjoining highway land on the western end of the site into a delivery bay for servicing of the hotel. Unfortunately, as this land is not available, the proposed delivery bay cannot be implemented. Hence, the application seeks to vary the approved drawings to delete the delivery bay in this location, and also to delete the requirement, the highways requirement for the formation of that delivery bay. No other changes are proposed to this application, although other non-material amendments have previously been agreed to the proposed scheme. The proposed servicing arrangements are acceptable to Herts County Council as the highway authority and subject to a Section 106 planning obligation to secure the off-site highway works that originally formed part of condition 16. This condition can be deleted and the works can be carried out under a 278 highways agreement with the County Council. The proposed amendment of condition 2 and the deletion of condition 16 are therefore acceptable, subject to a Section 106 being completed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Paul. Once again, we don't have any speakers for or against this application. So I'll just ask the committee whether anyone wants to speak on it. It's a pretty straightforward technical matter. As far as I can see, it doesn't really have any wider implications. So does anyone want to speak? I'm seeing no hands. So that being the case, I will put the officer's recommendation to the vote. And the recommendation is to approve subject to Section 106 heads of terms and conditions as set out in Section 8 of the officer's report. So I will run down the list again. Stephen Johnson.
Agreed.
Councillor Bell.
Agreed.
Councillor Collette.
Agreed.
Councillor Smith.
For. Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Mills.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Pattinson.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Sharp.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Watkins.
Agreed.
Thank you. And Councillor Jeffrey. Agreed. So again, that's a unanimous vote for approval. So that application is approved, and that concludes the meeting. And that all remains for me to say thank you very much, everyone, for turning up. We seem to have survived without any major mishaps, apart from losing Ian Sharp just for a few minutes. And thanks very much to the officers for keeping us on track. So, thank you, and goodbye.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Happy birthday, Jenny.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.